Just 1 year after Napoleon sold the Louisiana Territory to the United States, a military expedition led by Captain Meriwether Lewis and Lieutenant William Clark set out to explore the land previously uncharted by Europeans. The trip lasted 2 years, 4 months, and 10 days, and many in the newly forming United States had thought the men died on the journey. Keep watching to learn more fascinating facts about the Lewis and Clark expedition. Number 1. Jefferson thought they might encounter woolly mammoths. Thomas Jefferson was pretty obsessed with mammoths. He may have been interested in discovering that it was actually the American mastodon, the mammoth's northern cousin that he enjoyed waxing lyrical about. But at the time, they were internationally recognized as mammoths. He collected fossils and asked his friends to mail him any mammoth teeth they came across. And he was absolutely convinced that these huge furry elephants still roam North America. His fascination had started when a 7-foot mammoth tusk, along with a huge jawbone, was found. Jefferson saw these massive beasts as a symbol of the strength of his newly emerging nation. Jefferson's main motive for finding a living mammoth was the work of a French naturalist, Georges-Louis Leclerc, Comte de Buffon. Although he had never been to America, Buffon wrote a scathing piece about American wildlife and how they could not compare to animals from the rest of the world. Buffon also commented that American bears, stags, and wolves were largely less impressive than their European counterparts. Jefferson hoped Lewis and Clark's voyage of discovery would encounter herds of woolly mammoths and perhaps giant ground sloths that would blow any other animal out of the water. Although the expedition discovered 122 new animals, Jefferson did not get the prehistoric ammunition he desired. Number 2. The Spanish were hunting them. Unbeknownst to the expedition's members, Spain had issued a warrant for their arrest, as Spain disputed the Louisiana Purchase, having only just ceded the territory to France. Also, as the Louisiana Territory was undefined and uncharted by Europeans, the Spanish felt Lewis and Clark were illegally trespassing on their territory. The Spanish were told about the expedition by their mole within Jefferson's administration, General James Wilkinson. While the expedition's mission was to find the legendary Northwest Passage, a water route from the Atlantic to the Pacific, the Spanish were convinced that the Americans were making a move on their gold-rich territories in the Southwest. Luckily for the expedition, the vast and wild Louisiana Territory meant they could unwittingly elude their pursuers. Number 3. Clark personally owned an enslaved man whom he brought on the trip. Although the exact number is unknown, there were around 45 people in the expedition party, including one black enslaved laborer named York. York had been born and raised in slavery. He had been the property of Clark's father, a prominent Southern farmer. He grew up alongside Clark, and it was probably York's imposing 6-foot, 200-pound stature that caused Clark to include him on the team. While on the trip, York was treated as a free man, handled firearms, hunted alongside other members, and helped to navigate the trails. Although, at first at least, York was not popular with the white Southern men in the group, he was a big hit with the Native Americans the group encountered. For the overwhelming majority of the locals, York was the first black person they had ever seen, and they were fascinated by the color of his skin and imposing stature. On numerous occasions, relations between the explorers and the local tribes were facilitated by the presence of York, who was dubbed Raven's Son by the Nez Perce tribe and Big Medicine by the Arakawa people, who wondered if he had spiritual powers. York had been a vital and trustworthy member of the expedition, and when the party returned, York expected he would be granted his freedom and paid like all the other men in the company. However, Clark refused, angry that York did not want to return to his life of servitude willingly. In a letter to his brother, Clark states, "He has got such a notion about freedom and his immense service that I do not expect he will be of much service to me again." Clark also stated that if he hired or sold York, it would have to be to a severe master. Number 4. The expedition was heavily armed. Although Lewis and Clark set out with the aim of a peaceful exploration in the name of diplomacy and science, most men in the Corps of Discovery expedition were soldiers, and the mission was viewed as a military one. With this in mind, the group carried with them a huge arsenal of weapons. They had rifles, muskets, 200 pounds of gunpowder, 400 pounds of lead for bullets, and hand weapons in the form of pikes, tomahawks, and knives. Lewis also had the latest in firearm technology, a pneumatic rifle that used compressed air to fire around 20 shots in succession silently. Despite the armaments, the weapons were primarily used to impress the locals and hunt. During the trip, they only engaged in one gun battle with the Blackfoot Confederacy on the return leg of their journey. Number 5. Sakaja had been kidnapped from her tribe 5 years previously. Sakaja was born into the Lemhi Shoshone tribe, but was taken from her home when she was around 12 years old. She was captured by a Hidatsa raiding party, who probably gave her the name we all know today, and taken to the Hidatsa's Knife River villages, where she was enslaved. She was purchased by a French-Canadian fur trader named Toussaint Charbonneau, who lived in the Hidatsa village of Metaharta. Charbonneau was 20 years older than Sakaja and had taken several other young Native American women as brides. Lewis and Clark arrived at their village in the winter of 1804. As Charbonneau could speak English, French, and some Western native languages, they hired him as an interpreter. As Charbonneau could not communicate in Shoshone, it was agreed that the then-pregnant Sakaja would accompany them as well. As it turned out, this was a good move. Sakaja proved invaluable to the expedition. In addition to interpretation, she helped identify edible plants, made moccasins and clothing for the men, and helped navigate. In addition, the presence of a native woman carrying a child helped the group to indicate their peaceful intentions and allayed the suspicions of any local groups they approached. In mid-August, the party encountered a band of Shoshone. It turned out that the group was led by Sakaja's brother, whom she had been separated from for 5 years. The emotional reunion undoubtedly helped the expedition's relations with the Shoshone, who provided the party with horses and guides to help them cross the Rocky Mountains. Number 6. Only one member of the team died during the 2-year expedition. Although the expedition party suffered snake bites, dysentery, various injuries, and venereal disease, only one member of the group actually died on the trip. At around age 21, Sergeant Charles Floyd was probably the youngest member of the Corps. His family was well acquainted with Clark's family, and he had been named the first constable of Clarksville Township in 1801. As he was only roughly 19 at the time, his appointment to the position suggests he was both capable and well thought of in the community. 3 months into their journey, Floyd became ill near modern-day Sioux City, Iowa. Lewis proclaimed he had bilious colic, and despite efforts to save him, he died on August 20, 1804. Historians believe that Floyd suffered from a burst appendix, meaning that he would have died even if he had stayed in Clarksville Township. By joining the Corps of Discovery, he gained posthumous fame as the only member of the group to perish on the expedition. Number 7. Lewis was shot by one of the expedition's members. Although only one man died, the expedition was not short of injuries. On August 11, 1806, Meriwether Lewis was shot in the hip by one of his comrades. Although the injury did not kill Lewis, he was forced to spend several weeks lying on his belly in a canoe. Luckily, the shooting was not an assassination attempt, but a hunting mishap. While no one actually saw who pulled the trigger, all fingers pointed to Pierre Cruzat, a half-blind member of the company who was skilled at navigating boats through treacherous waters and playing the fiddle. One thing he was evidently not good at was hunting. While on an elk hunt, Lewis, who was dressed in elk skins, was shot in the rear. He wrote in his journal, "I called out to him, 'Damn you, you have shot me,' and looked towards the place from whence the ball had come. Seeing nothing, I called Cruzat several times as loud as I could, but received no answer." Number 8. Clark adopted Sakaja's children. During the trip, Sakaja gave birth to a boy named Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau. The unmarried Clark took a shine to the boy, nicknaming him Little Pomp or Pompey. Clark formed a solid friendship with Toussaint Charbonneau and greatly admired the tenacity of Sakaja, whom he called Janie. After the expedition ended, Clark made several attempts to adopt Jean-Baptiste, and in one letter to Charbonneau states, "As to your little son, my boy Pomp, you well know my fondness for him, and my anxiety to take and raise him as my own child." Although his offer was declined, upon Clark's invitation, Charbonneau moved his family to St. Louis in 1809 so Jean-Baptiste could be educated there. Although Charbonneau bought land from Clark and briefly tried his hand at farming, by 1811 he had sold the land back to Clark and started working for another explorer called Henry M. Breckenridge. This time, he took his other Shoshone wife with him on the expedition, while Sakaja and Jean-Baptiste remained in St. Louis with Clark as their ward. Nothing was recorded about Sakaja's feelings toward this arrangement, and toward the end of 1812, shortly after the birth of Sakaja's daughter Lisette, a woman who was recorded as Charbonneau's wife died. Many postulate that it was not Sakaja who died, saying that she started another family among the Comanche before returning to the Shoshones. However, this seems unlikely. Clark became the legal guardian of Jean-Baptiste and Lisette in 1813 and listed Sakaja as dead in the 1820s. As she had carried her son for around 2,000 miles during the expedition, it is doubtful that she would have willingly given him up. Number 9. They did not accomplish their mission. Although Lewis and Clark are much celebrated today, the significance of their trip was largely ignored at the time of their return. As most people thought they had died, having not heard from the explorers in over 2 years, when they returned, they were given a grand reception in St. Louis, as well as land for their efforts. However, they had not accomplished their mission's objective, and they didn't discover a suitable land route across the continent or water route from the Atlantic to the Pacific. In fact, interest in their expedition's findings was so minimal that they didn't publish an official account of the journey until 8 years after they returned, and even then, they didn't include any of their scientific findings. Number 10. They added to the speculation that a tribe in the Dakotas was descended from the Welsh. Since the 18th century, there were rumors that there was a tribe of Native Americans that had descended from medieval Welsh explorers. This theory was based on a 15th century Welsh poem, which describes Prince Madag Abawain Gwynedd sailing to America in 1170. The claim was well known, and early explorers claimed to have been in contact with a local tribe living on the Tennessee and Missouri rivers that seemed different from the others. They were described as white and had forts, towns, and permanent settlements laid out like Welsh villages, with streets and squares. The 18th century pioneers also claimed that their language was very similar to Welsh. Rather than canoes, the tribe used Welsh-style coracles, and unlike other natives in the area, their hair turned white with age. Jefferson was eager to discover whether these tales were true and encouraged Lewis and Clark to find verification of the stories. Lewis and Clark encountered a tribe called the Mandan in what is now North Dakota. They formed a close friendship with the group, and Lewis and Clark reported similarities, including their language, between them and the Welsh, fueling the belief that they were the descendants of Prince Madag. In reality, researchers have found no evidence of Welsh ancestry among the Mandan, and their language is Siouan, which has no connection to Welsh. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the history of Louisiana, check out our book, The History of Louisiana, a captivating guide to everything from Native Americans, Cajuns, and Creoles to the Louisiana Purchase, Battle of New Orleans, and more. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.